We've all encountered them, people who are absolutely convinced they're experts even when the facts say otherwise, the coworker who confidently derails meetings with ridiculous ideas, the friend who argues with a doctor after reading one blog post, the internet commenter who tries to educate an actual scientist. They're everywhere. And here's the twist, they genuinely believe they're the smartest person in the room. But why does this happen? Why do people with the least knowledge often have the most confidence? And why do those who are actually skilled or intelligent tend to second-guess themselves? This bizarre paradox has a name. It's not arrogance, it's not ignorance. It's something far more fascinating and far more common than you might think. It's called the Dunning-Kruger Effect. Discovered by psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger, this cognitive bias explains why some people are too incompetent to realize they're incompetent, and it doesn't just affect a few unlucky individuals. It affects students, professionals, influencers, and even politicians. In fact, the less people know, the more they think they know. In this video, we're diving deep into the mind-bending psychology behind this effect. So, what exactly is the Dunning-Kruger effect? Let's break it down in plain English. The Dunning-Kruger effect is a cognitive bias where people with low ability in a certain area overestimate their own skills. In simple terms, the less people know, the more they believe they know. They're not faking confidence. They truly believe they're competent, even when they're not. This isn't just an internet meme or a funny observation, it's backed by real psychological research. Back in 1999, two social psychologists, David Dunning and Justin Kruger, conducted a series of experiments at Cornell University. Here's how it started. They were inspired by a real-life news story that was both hilarious and tragic. A man named MacArthur Wheeler robbed two banks in broad daylight without a mask. When he was caught just hours later, he was genuinely confused. Why? Because he believed that rubbing lemon juice on his face made him invisible to security cameras. No joke, he thought lemon juice, like invisible ink, would hide his face from view. He wasn't trying to be funny or ironic. He truly believed he'd found a genius hack. This got Dunning and Kruger thinking, how could someone be so mistaken about something so basic and still be completely confident? So, they tested it. They asked people to complete tasks in grammar, logical reasoning, and humor. Then, they asked those same people to rate their performance. The results were shocking. People who scored in the bottom 25%, the least competent, consistently rated themselves as above average. Meanwhile, those who actually scored well often underestimated how well they did. In short, the least skilled people had no idea how unskilled they were. And worse, they thought they were great. This wasn't about arrogance or ego, it was about not knowing enough to realize what they didn't know. Think of it like this. If you've never played the piano before and you manage to play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, you might feel like a musical genius. But if you're a concert pianist, you know just how hard mastery really is, and you're painfully aware of how much you still have to learn. That's the Dunning-Kruger effect in action. So, when someone speaks with unshakable confidence about something they clearly don't understand, whether it's science, politics, medicine, or even how airplanes fly, remember, they're not always lying. They might just be completely unaware of how little they know. This effect shows up in everyday life more often than you'd think. But before we go into real-world examples, let's explore the psychological reasons why this happens. Because the truth is, this isn't just about being dumb. It's about something much deeper and much more human. So now that we know what the Dunning-Kruger effect is, the question becomes, why does it happen? Why do people who lack skill or knowledge often believe they're more competent than they really are? The short answer is simple. They don't know enough to realize how much they don't know. But the full explanation lies deep inside the way our brains work, specifically our metacognition. Metacognition is your brain's ability to reflect on its own thought processes. It's basically thinking about thinking. It's how you evaluate your own performance and decide whether you really understand something or not. In competent people, metacognition works well. They can look at a task and say, I'm not sure I did this correctly, or I might need to study more before claiming I know this. But people who lack skill also tend to lack metacognitive awareness. They don't just get things wrong, they don't even realize they're getting things wrong. It's like trying to judge your painting skill while being blindfolded. This is called a double burden. Not only are they incompetent, but they're also incapable of recognizing their incompetence. In the words of David Dunning himself, if you're incompetent, you can't know you're incompetent. The skills you need to produce a right answer are exactly the skills you need to recognize what a right answer is. Here's where it gets tricky. We often confuse confidence with competence. When someone speaks clearly, loudly, or assertively, we assume they must know what they're talking about. But confidence can be completely detached from actual knowledge. In fact, studies have shown that the least skilled people are often the most confident because they've never had the experience of being truly challenged. They've never made enough mistakes to learn humility. Meanwhile, the most skilled people tend to underestimate themselves. Why? Because they're painfully aware of how deep the subject really is. They know there's always more to learn, and this creates something called the imposter syndrome. Skilled people often say, maybe I just got lucky. Others probably know more than I do. What if I'm wrong? So ironically, the more competent you become, the more you question yourself. Imagine you've just learned a few phrases in French. You walk into a Parisian cafe, order a croissant and coffee, and feel like a bilingual genius. You think, wow, I'm nailing this. But then the waiter responds in fluent, rapid-fire French. And suddenly you realize you don't understand a word. That's the Dunning-Kruger effect in action. It's the illusion that comes from a little knowledge. Just enough to make you feel smart, but not enough to show you the depth of your ignorance. This is sometimes visualized with a chart called the Mount Stupid curve. At first, your confidence spikes as you learn the basics, but then, as you dig deeper and see how complex the topic is, your confidence drops. Eventually, with enough time and study, it rises again, but more slowly and with humility. Most people get stuck on the first peak, Mount Stupid, where they know just enough to be dangerous, but not enough to be accurate. There's another layer here, ego. Admitting that you don't know something can feel like weakness, especially in public. People don't want to appear clueless, especially in front of coworkers, friends, or online followers. So instead of saying, I don't know, they pretend they do. They make up answers. They argue louder. They double down on bad ideas just to save face. And sadly, in the age of social media, this behavior is often rewarded. False confidence gets likes, shares, followers. Being loud and wrong is more viral than being quiet and accurate. So, the Dunning-Kruger effect doesn't just exist in our heads, it's also shaped by external validation. When enough people cheer you on, it's easy to believe you must be right. Evolutionary roots. Some scientists even argue that this effect may have evolutionary roots. In prehistoric times, being decisive, even when wrong, might have helped leaders make fast survival decisions. In moments of danger, hesitation could be deadly, so nature may have favored confidence over caution. But in modern society, where we need careful reasoning and expertise, that same instinct can become a liability. People rush to conclusions. They ignore experts. They make decisions based on gut feelings instead of facts. And the Dunning-Kruger effect becomes not just a personal flaw, but a societal one. The Dunning-Kruger effect happens because the unskilled lack the self-awareness to recognize their mistakes. It's a double blind. They're bad at something and bad at noticing they're bad. Metacognition is the missing tool. They can't judge themselves accurately. A little knowledge can be more misleading than none at all. Confidence is often mistaken for competence, especially in loud or charismatic people. And social media ego and even evolution can all reinforce the illusion of intelligence. But here's the good news. The Dunning-Kruger effect doesn't have to be permanent. In the next chapter, we'll explore how this shows up in real life, from the workplace to social media, and how to spot it when it happens. Because the first step toward wisdom is realizing how much you don't know. By now, you understand the theory. But let's bring it to life. Because the Dunning-Kruger effect isn't just some abstract psychological concept buried in textbooks. It plays out around us every single day in workplaces, online platforms, classrooms, politics, and even at family dinners. Let's dive into some real-world examples that show just how common and sometimes dangerous this phenomenon can be. Let's start with a place we all know too well, the workplace. Imagine you're sitting in a meeting. The team is discussing a technical problem, maybe something related to software, design, or marketing strategy. Suddenly, a coworker who clearly doesn't understand the topic starts dominating the discussion. They talk with absolute certainty, confidently proposing a solution that makes no sense. They interrupt others, dismiss expert opinions, and push their idea like it's brilliant. You glance around the room and see the awkward looks. Everyone knows they're wrong, but the coworker doesn't. Why? Because they lack the knowledge to recognize how little they know. They're standing tall on Mount Stupid with full confidence and zero self-awareness. This isn't rare. In fact, it's painfully common. In many organizations, these types of employees are often promoted not because of skill, but because their confidence is mistaken for leadership. Meanwhile, quieter, more competent people are overlooked because they speak with caution, not swagger. Now let's talk about the internet, a Dunning-Kruger goldmine. Take YouTube, Twitter, Reddit, or Facebook. Scroll for 5 minutes and you'll find people with zero qualifications giving full-blown lectures on how to cure cancer naturally, why the earth is flat, how vaccines are a government conspiracy, what's wrong with Einstein's theory of relativity. They don't say, I think this might be true. They say, I know I'm right, and anyone who disagrees is a sheep. This is textbook Dunning-Kruger. People read one blog post or watch one video and suddenly believe they've outsmarted decades of scientific research. But here's the dark twist. They're often more persuasive than actual experts. Why? Because they're simple. They speak in absolutes. They appeal to emotion, not evidence. Meanwhile, real experts often use cautionary language. The data suggests. It's more complicated than that. We're still researching. And sadly, online audiences are drawn to certainty, not nuance. This means misinformation spreads fast, powered by people who genuinely believe they've uncovered hidden truths, when in reality, they're just stuck in the fog of ignorance. Nowhere is the Dunning-Kruger effect more visible or more dangerous than in politics. Politicians are often asked to speak on issues like climate change, economics, public health, or international relations. Yet many have no real expertise in these areas. Still, they speak with total authority, often ignoring scientists, economists, or historians. They simplify complex topics into catchy slogans. They make confident predictions that fall apart under scrutiny, and they create policies based on gut feeling instead of expert advice. Why? Because in politics, confidence wins votes. Admitting uncertainty or lack of knowledge is seen as weakness. So, the Dunning-Kruger effect becomes a political strategy, but the consequences can be devastating. Bad public health decisions during a pandemic, poor economic policies that harm millions, ignorant environmental laws that accelerate climate change, and all of it fueled by people who believe they're smarter than the experts because they don't know what they don't know. Now let's bring it home. You're at a family dinner. Everything's going well until someone brings up a controversial topic. Maybe it's health, politics, parenting, or history, and suddenly your uncle, who's never read a book on the subject, starts ranting like a professor. He's sure of his facts, he knows who's right and who's wrong, and if you try to disagree, he doubles down with more certainty. It's frustrating, it's exhausting, and it's pure Dunning-Kruger. In families, the effect often goes unchecked, because people rarely call each other out. So, the confident but clueless continue to dominate conversations, while the thoughtful ones stay silent to avoid conflict. Ever seen someone audition for a talent show, like American Idol or Britain's Got Talent, and perform horribly, yet believe they're the next superstar? They sing off-key. They forget lyrics. Their performance is a disaster, but they walk off stage furious at the judges, convinced they've just been robbed of a record deal. Why? Because they genuinely can't tell how bad their performance was. They think they nailed it. That's not just arrogance, it's the Dunning-Kruger effect. They lack the skill to assess their skill, so instead of feeling embarrassed, they feel insulted that others don't see their talent. Why these examples matter? These aren't just funny stories, they're a warning. Because the Dunning-Kruger effect doesn't just make people overconfident, it makes them blind to growth. When you believe you're already right, you stop learning. When you think you're an expert, you stop listening. And when millions of people do this, society suffers. Misinformation spreads. Bad ideas gain momentum, and real experts get drowned out by loud amateurs. But here's the silver lining. The more you understand this effect, the easier it becomes to spot, and to avoid falling into it yourself. In the next chapter, we'll break down how to protect yourself from the Dunning-Kruger trap and how to deal with others who are clearly caught in it. Because self-awareness isn't just a trait, it's a superpower. How to protect yourself from the Dunning-Kruger effect by... Now, you've seen how the Dunning-Kruger effect shows up in workplaces, on the internet, in politics, and even at the dinner table. But here's the most important part. How do you make sure you don't fall into the same trap? Because the hard truth is we all do at some point. That's right. The Dunning-Kruger effect isn't just about other people. It can happen to anyone, including you, including me. So, let's talk about how to recognize it in yourself and how to deal with it in others. It sounds simple, but in a world obsessed with being right, saying, "I don't know," feels like failure. It's not. It's actually the beginning of wisdom. When you admit you don't know something, you create space to learn. When you act like you already know everything, you stop growing. The smartest people in the world, scientists, engineers, philosophers, they constantly question themselves. They use words like, "It's possible," "We don't have enough data yet," "Let's test that idea." Meanwhile, it's often the most clueless who speak in absolutes. So next time you feel the urge to argue confidently about a topic you barely understand, pause and ask, do I actually know this, or am I guessing? Humility isn't weakness. It's the foundation of intelligence. Remember when we talked about metacognition, the ability to think about your own thoughts? This is where it becomes your secret weapon. Self-check questions like, could I be wrong? What am I basing this belief on? Who do I trust on this topic, and why? These questions force your brain to reevaluate your confidence. It's like holding up a mirror to your own thoughts. It might be uncomfortable, but it's incredibly powerful, because often the first step to becoming smarter is realizing how little you truly know. This sounds obvious, but it's key. Keep learning, not just casually, but deeply. A 10-minute YouTube video or a single article doesn't make you an expert. Expertise comes from layers of knowledge: books, coursework, experience, and peer-reviewed understanding. And the deeper you go into any subject, science, art, history, health, the more you'll realize how vast it is. You'll go from, "I know everything about this," to, "Wow, this is way more complex than I thought." And that shift, from false certainty to healthy curiosity, is what pulls you off Mount Stupid and sets you on the path of real intelligence. We live in a time where everyone has a platform. That's a good thing in many ways, but it also means people who shout the loudest often drown out those who know the most. Real experts might not be flashy, they might not use clickbait or wild claims, but they've dedicated years, sometimes decades, to mastering their field. So, if you find yourself arguing with a climate scientist about global warming or dismissing a doctor's advice after watching a TikTok, stop. Ask yourself, who has put in more time and effort to understand this? It's okay to question things, but your questions should lead to learning, not dismissiveness. And when someone shows you evidence you're wrong, don't panic. Don't argue just to save face. Instead, say, "Thank you. I didn't know that." That's not losing, that's evolving. Echo chambers are dangerous. If you only talk to people who agree with you, you'll never see your blind spots. You'll start to think your opinions are facts, and your knowledge is complete. That's how people get trapped in the Dunning-Kruger bubble. So, surround yourself with people who ask questions, push back, know more than you in some areas. Disagreement isn't an attack, it's an opportunity. It's how we test our beliefs and improve them. The more you get comfortable being challenged,